Welcome to everybody to our webinar, An Introduction to Motus and Plans for the Caribbean. So this is a two-part webinar series. 1 week from today at the same time, we'll be doing part two, which is more on the nitty-gritty details of how you actually set up a Motus station. Like, what are the factors that you need to consider when you're planning one, how to pick your site, what kind of equipment do you need, what's involved in installing a station, all of that. So be sure to tune into part two next week as well. But today, we're very happy to give you, start with the very basics with an introduction to Motus, where we have excellent panelists with us today. We have Dr. Maya Wilson. She studied Bahamas swallows for her PhD, so she has a history with the Caribbean. And we've been really happy to have her come on board as our land bird program manager. And a few of you may have met her at our past conferences and then also at two workshops we held recently. One in the Dominican Republic on land bird monitoring, and then one in the Bahamas just last week, our first Caribbean bird banding workshop, which was really, really exciting. So, and then our other presenter is Lisa Kijuk. I hope I'm saying that right. She is the director of the Willistown Conservation Trust, which is a organization that works with land managers to conserve land in Pennsylvania. And then she's also one of the founding members of the Northeast Motus Collaboration, which is kind of like a consortium of nonprofits that's been working together to get Motus established in the Northeastern US. And we're really fortunate to have her with us today because she's going to share with us the incredible work that her group has been doing for the last few years and the incredible progress that they've made. And it's going to be, she's an excellent guru for us. She's been so helpful and such a role model for us for how to model our program. So we really thank Lisa for being with us. And then we also have with us Alex Sansom. She's our interim waterbird program manager based in Trinidad. And she's been working with us on waterbird and shorebird conservation with the Caribbean Waterbird Census and with lots of great funding support from the Environment and Climate Change Canada. We're also going to be working on putting up Motus stations specifically to track shorebirds. So she's helping out with this as well. And so I think that probably just about everybody or almost everybody that signed on to this webinar is familiar with Birds Caribbean. We're a regional nonprofit, and our mission is to raise awareness and promote sound science and build capacity in the region so that we can have a region that appreciates and conserves and benefits from all of our bird populations and ecosystems. So if you're not already a member, we encourage you to join us and sign up. Make sure you're getting our monthly newsletter to keep up to date with all of our activities. And be sure to follow us on social media. We're really active on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. So that's the extent of my introduction. And I'm going to turn it over to Maya to give us the first intro to what is Motus. Okay. And I would say, if you have some burning questions, please put them in the chat and we will monitor that. And we may answer them live or we may wait and we'll have time at the end for questions and discussion as well. So do feel free to put your questions in the Q&A or the chat and we'll monitor that and try to answer them at some point along the way. All right, take it away, Maya.
All right. Well, thank you, Lisa. As Lisa mentioned, I'm the Land Bird Monitoring Project Manager. So I just want to kind of start off with an introduction to what is Motus. Sorry, there we go. What is Motus? So the Motus Wildlife Tracking System is a collaborative research network that operates through Birds Canada as a program, but functions as a collaborative research network across the globe. And the system uses automated radio telemetry to track small animals. So this map that I have up right now is the current distribution of Motus stations throughout the world. Each of the yellow dots represents an individual station, which is composed of several main pieces. And we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of that next week, as Lisa mentioned. But typically, a station is composed of antennas, and the number of antennas can vary across stations, a supporting mast, a power system, and a receiver or a data logger. And these photos, these couple of photos that I have here, show a couple of station designs that we were lucky enough to see installed by John Rice and colleagues that are part of the Northeast Motus Collaboration, which Lisa is always also a part of and is joining us today. And they have been generously sharing their extensive knowledge with us, including today. But hopefully, in my next presentation about the Caribbean Motus Collaboration, we'll be able to show some stations in the Caribbean. So each of the stations automatically records signals from radio transmitter tags that are attached to birds or other small animals like bats and insects. And when they fly within the detection range of the antennas, which depending on the antenna can reach up to about 15 kilometers, each tag has a unique ID that is logged by the station along with a timestamp from the antenna that received that tag. And the lifetime of these tags can vary quite a bit. And again, maybe we'll have some time to discuss that a little bit later. But typically the tags can range from several weeks to the lifetime of the bird, depending on the size of the tag. So thanks to the work of many groups across the globe, the network is expanding really quickly, which of course constantly increases the power to track animal movements using this network, this tool. So I know that that was very brief, and I'm sure that you're going to have lots of questions about some of the details of Motus, but for now, we're going to take some time. We're going to hear from Lisa about the expansion of the Motus network through the Northeast Motus Collaboration and some of the things that they've learned through building that initiative. And then we're going to come back to the Caribbean. I'm going to stop sharing. Sorry, I know that was brief. Promise we'll discuss more.
I'll put my screen up now then, Maya. Is that good?
Yes.
Yes. Sorry, I stopped sharing. Yes. Okay. Just double checking. Yes.
Okay. So you can see my screen now, right? Everybody can
Yes.
see it?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone. And this is so exciting to have so many people excited about Motus. It is, I will warn those in the Caribbean to, I don't know if the correct word is Caribbean or Caribbean, but I've been saying Caribbean, so I'll stick with that for now. It's kind of like, I know you're not used to snowballs either, but up here in the north, we say it's like a snowball rolling downhill. It just keeps gaining momentum and size. So that's kind of been our experience since we started. And the initial partners that were founding members were Willistown Conservation Trust, which is a local land trust that I work for that tries to conserve open space and promote bird habitat on private lands. Project Owlnet, which is a Ned Smith Center for Nature and Art, run by Scott Weidensall and David Brinker, and then Luke DeGroot from Powder Mill Nature Reserve. And since then, we've added on Carol Foss from New Hampshire Audubon as well. And this is just the founding members, but there's so many more members that are included in this. Basically, you know, what are the overarching goals of Motus? It's conservation science, looking at basic discovery, and many publications almost on a weekly basis have been produced. It hopefully will impact policy and management decisions and conservation action. And then it also, because the data is open to the public, when that map that you saw that Maya showed, if you go on motus.org and click those dots, you can see all the data on each dot of all the species that have passed by that station and when they did. And you can then go look at the project that it's associated with. So this is unique in that it is a completely open network and geared towards having general public able to go in and look at what's going through their area. So it's kind of like eBird, but not citizen science. They're actually tracking live animals. And this is just kind of a visual. We call Birds Canada the mothership, and she takes all the data, collects all that. We put up the stations, we deploy the tags, but all of the data goes through the Motus database, which is managed by Birds Canada, which is overseeing the entire management of Motus. but relies heavily on the collaborators to do a lot of the work. And so then you can just see how this filters through. So it's a unique system that we're using. Believe it or not, this is what the map looked like when we started in 2016. And when we first started, Dave, Scott, and I got together. We were going to look at saw-whet owls and just look at what was happening around our own little banding stations. But thankfully, we ran into Dan Brauning from the Pennsylvania Game Commission at the NAOC conference in 2017. And he said, oh, I have some funding for you, but how about we look at it this way? He said, why don't we look at it a different way? Instead of looking at your own small projects, let's build something that can benefit a greater good. And so you can just see that there's this geographic gap here that existed in 2017. And Dan Brauning, Pennsylvania kind of goes like this. It's a state that goes across. He thought it would be really great to connect one end of the state to the other with an array that was more like a fence line, so that any birds crossing this region that data would get collected. So this is just a better image. We were realizing people working with Swainson's thrush tend to use an interior flyway as opposed to the coastal stations. This Motus originally was developed to look at shorebird migration and coastal songbird migration, and it was heavily implemented in the Great Lakes region. But a bird could be tagged in Quebec and fly all the way down the Atlantic Flyway and never hit a station. And they were realizing that when they first did the early thrush study. So here's Dan Brauning coming up with this funding and the idea to do a statewide array. At first we thought he was a little crazy, but then we thought, well, we'll go for it. We have the money. And Birds Canada was instrumental in helping us to plan this. We really didn't know what we were doing at this point in terms of installing stations. We had people come help us for this first leg, and the site planning took a lot of time, but in about 2 weeks of straight field work, we had the majority of these stations up. So it was really exciting to build that first statewide array. Since then, we've actually just submitted a proposal for our third competitive state wildlife grant. This was our first state wildlife grant, which has just ended. This is a study by Jeff Bueller using NextRad weather data to look at what the hotspots are of migratory stopover. He looks at the weather data and anticipates that this is where the birds mainly use these areas. And so part of our work to put up stations in the mid-Atlantic, we were supposed to put up 45 stations in the mid-Atlantic, was to ground truth this data by looking at whether these were in fact hotspots for stopover. And so this was our project in 2019. Here were the red were existing and the blue were the spots that we started to install. So this is at the beginning of the Adirondacks. This is the I-90 corridor between the Adirondack Mountains and the Catskill Mountains. And this is the Pocono, this goes across the Pocono mountain chain. So we were trying to create these corridors to see how the birds were using the internal areas. Plus, geographically speaking, it was a lot easier to put them in the spaces between the mountains than on the mountains themselves. And after that grant, we are now working on our New England, we call it the SWIG New England grant. And there's Todd Allen. He started with us in Pennsylvania. And then as the network built, he migrated up to Maine and is now the project manager for the entire New England network. And they have about 20 stations left on their grant. So by the end of this year, we should have about 125 stations that the Northeast Motus Collaboration is managing. And this is through New Hampshire Audubon. They're kind of the premier organization in the Northeast, in the northern Northeast, managing that. Whoops, sorry, I think I went back one. Yeah, and these are the states where they are concentrating on. So we did the Mid-Atlantic that just ended, and then they're doing Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island. And as you can see, like through this success that we've had, we have been sharing information with these other regions, and this has kind of been the growth of the Motus network. So this area is really well coordinated, except for the south, but we'll get to that. And so this these Midwestern areas are now, this area is getting built up really well. They had a competitive state wildlife grant. These Western states too are also building their network, and they take lessons from us, but they deal with lots of other issues. So it's always a learning experience with Motus, and you have to look at your geography and resources and plan around that. A couple, let's see, 2 years ago, I guess, we were helping with Costa Rica, which is where I met Holly Garrett, one of our banders, was running a Motus station there. And so we worked with the Guanacaste land conserving place, whatever, Guanacaste, sorry, I forget their name. But there are 2 Motus stations that were installed due to funding that we were able to get. And then there were also simultaneously stations being put up in Panama by Birds Canada and other stations in Costa Rica. And now, of course, there's this big area that we're going to focus on this evening. That is the Caribbean. It's kind of a gaping hole in the network, and obviously so many birds go through this region. So it's a crucial area to build network if we want to put the pieces together of this full life cycle, annual life cycle of the species that we're looking at. And that's kind of what Motus is. It's really being able to look at the full annual cycle, because they never spend their whole lives in our areas. And so this is so important to create these pieces, to see where are the birds, where should we focus our conservation efforts and resources to kind of reverse all these bird declines that have been happening over the last few decades. In addition to the low-tech technology, we've also adapted the cellular tracking technologies. Dave Lapuma's on the call tonight. And so our stations are all what we call dual mode. They listen to 424 and 166 different, what do you call them? Radio signals. So they handle both kinds of tags. CTT has created these solar tags that are very interesting, along with node networks. And so the technology has been building. They also have sensor stations, which we use instead of sensor gnomes, because you can check the data and download it remotely. And that saved us a lot of money from having to get people to go out there individually and collect data. So there's a lot of different advantages of different types of technologies. It's just a matter of looking at what questions you want to ask and what your needs are. But we're hoping that people can choose what they want. And then, so that's why everything's dual mode. And that's kind of what we ask people to do. So you can see these smaller antennas are the ones that listen for the cellular tracking technology tags. And then the longer ones are listening to the low-tech tags. There's been a lot of work on which tags have better detection rates, and it depends on the landscape, but we have found a longer range with the 434s, which is what CTT's tags listen to. But still, both tags are very, very good. And this is just us testing. That's Dave Brinker's truck testing the distance, the detection rate of the tags. Okay, so here's, again, a picture of just the global Motus network. You can see it's starting to build internationally, but we're really focused here on the Western Hemisphere, and it is growing exponentially. When we started, there were less than 300 stations, and today there's over 900 stations built. So you can see how rapidly this network is growing. This is a really cool slide that Stu let me have. And it just shows the Swainson's thrush fall migration from the Canadian side, and then spring migration from Colombia. And it's a powerful image, because when you show regular people these maps and how the birds are moving, it's very powerful, because I think they listen to us as biologists, but it doesn't resonate as much as a map showing the tracks and how fast they're going. In some cases, you can determine that. So that's been really a powerful way to describe movement ecology to an average person that doesn't study science. And so just some of what have we learned that are really cool since Motus has started? There's so many examples, but these are a few of my favorite. This is they looked at the fuel load that it was acquired at stopover sites, and how they influence the pace of gray-cheeked thrush migration. So they basically looked at the condition of the bird before they put the nano tags on them I think it was in Colombia here. Sorry, this thing is in the way. And so they took birds that were from poor quality habitat and put nano tags on them, and then birds from higher quality habitat that were in much better condition when they left for the breeding season. And it showed that birds that were left from better habitat actually showed up to the breeding grounds up to 30 days earlier than the other birds that left in poorer condition. And that impacted their ability to breed successfully. Some of those birds that got there too late, they couldn't breed at all. So there's just so many things we're learning about the importance of the different parts of their annual life cycle. The results so far, we just downloaded data, so I don't have everything combined, but just to give you some example, when we band birds at our station, we have thousands of data points, but when we put up these Motus stations, and if you look at just banding in general, in the last 60 years, it's collected about 100,000 data points. But with Motus, every time those birds cross those stations, it's like they're hitting their own Motus. It's like they're hitting a banding station. I don't know about you in the Caribbean, but we get very few recaptures and very few birds that we get at other stations that are recaptured again. And as far as songbirds are concerned. So to see these different detections when you put the bird through the stress of banding them and collecting all that data, and then to see everywhere that it goes, it's just a very powerful experience. So from our network, we've received 11.7 million detections. And again, this is already a year old, so this number is much higher, of 1,700 individual birds, bats, and butterflies of 85 species. Some examples are Swainson's thrushes, barn swallows, wood thrushes, common nighthawks. We have red knots going across, we have shorebirds, dunlins, and then also some bats have also been researched. Even monarch butterflies have crossed our network. So just a huge range of species that multiple scientists are working on. And every station you build contributes to their projects and to the overall knowledge base. And this is just an example of something we did locally. We worked with bobolinks because we're trying to conserve some grassland areas in our program area. And we set up multiple nodes. So this isn't just one Motus station. We also set up some miniature Motus stations to be able to triangulate. And we also did a lot of hand tracking. You have to decide what you're trying to learn when you're putting these tags on. And so if you're doing local movements, you really need to be able to track the birds a little more intensely if you want to see these local breeding movements. And then the broader network shows up the migratory patterns. So I think this is one trend we're seeing among a lot of breeding birds, and I think Maya will talk about this a little later with another species, but the birds move around much greater distances than you ever thought. We always thought that the pairs would stay in their particular grassland during the breeding season and then move after breeding. But here's an example of a male bobolink during breeding season, and he almost daily would move within 20 miles of his site. So it showed us that it wasn't just the grassland they were breeding in that was important, but also the connectivity to other grasslands that was equally as important, because they do move quite a bit. And this was true with males and even the females that were breeding. And then we also looked at, once they were done breeding, then we were able to get a good look at the migration. Now, of course, this area is kind of a gaping hole, which I'll also talk about. So we didn't have a lot of stations, but we banded bobolinks here, and then we also collaborated with University of Maine and University of New England. And a lot of our birds got together on the Delmarva Peninsula and staged there, and then all of them kind of followed these similar paths. And one thing that we learned, and it's only 1 year of data, so we're going to do it again this year, but we had two different populations. One group would go down the coast. And this particular male is indicative of the coastal migration. Over 9 days, he traveled along the East Coast, covering about 1,000 miles, and then was last detected on Key Largo, Florida on September 11th. And so half of the birds made this exact same trajectory. And then the other male, he began his migration a little later on September 3rd, and he headed, he flew, in the first month of the day, in over 24 hours, he flew 900 miles south to the Hobie Sound National Wildlife Refuge in Florida. So he kind of took a direct route over this ocean part, and the other ones kind of went a coastal route. And we're seeing that more frequently with different species. Some go over the ocean and go faster, and some take a coastal route and go slower. So this is an interesting, it tells you that there's two routes that we have to be concerned with. Again, we don't really know. And then this is just something we handed out to landowners, and so much of what you do is outreach. People come up to you when you're out in the field and they're like, oh, what are you doing? You know, you're using technology. And I laughed with Lisa and Maya and Alex earlier today, because it feels like as a biologist, you put all these hours into the field and you work early mornings and out with the bugs and the sun, and you all know what I'm talking about. And then you try to tell people what you found out. And if you're just doing banding or monitoring, they're like, oh yeah, that's great. But if you tell them you're using technology, all of a sudden they believe every word you say. It's like technology is better than just pure biology. Anyway, it's funny how that works, but it is very effective as a tool to communicate to the public. One interesting picture here, I don't know if you can see it very well. What happens is the mowing regimens come in before the birds are finished breeding. And so we're trying to alter the haying periods to delay it 2 weeks. And we did catch one tractor haying a field, and there was a bald eagle flying right by the tractor. So I guess it was pretty cool, because obviously the tractor is killing a lot of things as it mows, and you see a lot of raptors. So that's just kind of a side note that's pretty cool. So that's just literally the tip of the iceberg of things that you can do with Motus that we've had experience with. But everyone always says, oh, how did you do all this? Like, how did you make this work? And I just have to say, it's teamwork. It's a group of people with diverse skills, and you know, they bring different things to the table, and together we were able to do all of this work. Some people are better at technology. Some people are better at putting tags on birds. Some of us fundraise and do outreach. Some are education, but together, everybody does their part, and it creates this incredible network and powerful system that it's almost like a little ecosystem where everybody does their part, and it continuously grows and moves. And here's part of our ecosystem here. Allison Fetterman is our project manager overall. She knows how to site everything. She does all the maps. Erin is one of our newest techs. John Rice, which Lisa Sorensen and Maya mentioned, is in his happy place at the top of a Motus station. And here's just a bunch of people that work with us. And Shelly's doing a TOE project in the Northeast in the next few years, working with Jeff Bueller. So it's just an incredible group of people that we work with. And collaboration is the key. Nobody does anything by themselves. I think the coolest part about Motus is that we're all working together for a common goal. And we've got incredible backing from the Fish and Wildlife Service, from our state agencies. These are just some of the groups that we work together, even other places in different countries, Birds Canada, Caribbean, Costa Rica. It's just been incredible. And it shows you the power of people working together for a common goal. And then the third time's a charm. So this is what we're working on now. We have 4 new states that came in, and we've just sent a proposal in for our 3rd competitive state wildlife grant. And so you can see, here's the stations in the Northeastern US. So our grant will hopefully pay for 40 stations to be put in this Southeast region. and then also help out with Florida. So within the next few years, this whole region will be really well covered, which is incredibly exciting, especially as the Caribbean gets their stations built. This network will be so useful to so many different researchers working with these different species. Just to give you some example of the species that are going to be worked on, these are the northeastern species. It'll be ovenbird, northern saw-whet owl, eastern towhee, Canada warbler, rusty blackbird, and Louisiana water thrush. But some of the other species in the south is bog turtle and gray bats. And so there's just really, as this develops and as people work together and think of new concepts, different species are using this technology to help fill the gaps. Again, universities all over are embracing this technology and putting it into their curriculum. This is, again, a tip of the iceberg. There's so many other schools, but these are the main schools that we are dealing with. And we should add University of Connecticut to this now. They just got they're just getting their first Motus station. The cool thing is it's not just for universities and nonprofits. Here's a nice couple that lived on a private land with an easement, and they volunteered. They were in the perfect spot for a Motus station, and now they're the proud owners of a Motus station. And when you have these stations all over, it's so great if the landowner takes some ownership and helps you out. So, you know, if something happens, they call you. It just helps. It's, again, this working together. All different kinds of people get so excited about Motus stations. It's been great. Of course, not everything's easy. We learn a few things the hard way. This is now a station named Porcupine Hill. And as you can see, a porcupine basically ate the station. We went up for a check and the station was leaning over. We're like, what is going on? And it ate everything, the box, so now we use much different quality into, apparently this particular metal had a lot of salt in it, so the porcupines were very attracted to it. But now we've caged off this particular station, and we have, knock on wood, have not had any porcupine issues. But you know, you have to learn a few things from Mother Nature. Oh, there he is. The other thing is Motus stations always take longer to install than you think. You think, oh, we could knock this out in a day, but I have yet to see a Motus station be completed in a day. And usually Motus stations go up in the summer when people are done with their busy spring field season and getting ready for the fall season. And so summer is usually the best time. So you need a lot of Gatorade and a lot of trips to the hardware store, because you never seem to have the right equipment till you get out there and wonder what you need. And then here's Ross working at night, trying to get that station done in one day. But we will just let him finish what he's doing. He knows he's still going to have to come back tomorrow. And then no two Motus stations are the same. I would say the biggest barrier to entry is just this steep learning curve. This is where we were in 2016. And I will tell you, it is very, I don't know, I was scared, I'm not gonna lie. I just remember going, how am I gonna know all this? How can I learn all this? And I would do the videos and read and everything. But until I started going out on the Motus installations, then it all started to make sense. And it's a very hands-on learning experience. So if you can get out in the field and be part of some of these stations being built, you will learn the tricks of the trade, and eventually you'll get all the way to the top, and then you'll hit a new station that no one's ever seen before, and you'll have to start back down at the bottom. So I think part of the allure is that it is hard to learn, so that you feel, you know, once you learn it, you feel really accomplished. And then there's this challenge that it's never going to be the same. So you're always learning something new with Motus. And I think people like that part of it. And then I'm just going to plug the San Juan, Puerto Rico AOS conference, where we'll all be down there. There will be a big Motus workshop all day. And also a roundtable to talk about the strategic planning of the future of Motus. And also, another benefit of Motus is that there's a great education curriculum piece on the website, motus.org, in education, available for teachers to use these case studies as examples and to create case studies of their own. And so this has been really popular. A lot of schools are putting up Motus stations because, especially in the US, I don't know what it's like in the Caribbean, but the big push in education is to integrate technology with the science curriculum. So this fits so well. It's got a conservation message. It teaches them about engineering, biology, and wildlife and biodiversity. There's so many lessons. It's amazing. And it also has data analysis. So, Motus will be redesigned. They are redesigning their website, and it's going to be a lot more user-friendly for teachers and nature centers moving forward. So there's exciting changes on the horizon from Birds Canada. Just to give you a sense of how much money a station might cost, because that's the other thing that everybody wonders about. And the second biggest challenge, which is the fundraising. We started asking just for $5,000, but that quickly did not become enough. It's labor intensive at the onset. So you want to make sure you have enough money to pay the people that know how to put them up or that can help you put them up. And then the equipment, runs about $6,000. And then you put some overhead in to cover maintenance and other things. And so 10,000 is a pretty good number to ask for when you're trying to fund stations. And we have full equipment lists and details on the Northeast Motus station, northeastmotus.com website. And a lot of great resources can be found there. And again, you can always contact us. We're very willing to help with anything we can. And so here, I think, when we started, I was so worried about how we're going to fund this, but I have to be honest, this has been the easiest project to fund because it has the trifecta for funding streams, which are birds, technology, and education. So I don't know what it is about Motus, but donors love to give to it and see how they love to donate to infrastructure and something that everybody can share. And this collaboration and altruistic behavior that comes from this. So it's just amazing. It's an amazing tool for funding, and it's an amazing tool for research and collaboration, and just so much fun. So just to wrap it up, the ultimate goal is to increase the participation in our efforts and work towards a land conservation ethic that benefits all who love and use the land, especially birds. So that's it. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Oh, thank you so much, Lisa. That was awesome, really inspiring. And we're just copying Lisa's group. We're setting up the Caribbean Motus Collaboration and trying to put together the teams and work with all of you guys in the Caribbean as our partners to get our network set up. And so we're learning a ton from Lisa. It's been really, really helpful. And we're going to be working with all of you in the coming months and years to get this station set up. And we're already in touch with some of you. So let's see if there's any burning questions for Lisa. We could take a couple right now, but then we should get into Maya's talk and we can have more Q&A at the end. We did have one question from Daphne, and you kind of answered it, but maybe you want to say a little bit more about it. She asked, how many birds are tagged, and are there more stations than tagged birds?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, there's more tags out than stations because they're a lot easier. And I think
don't cost as much. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are the cost of tags?
I could paste the link to the
$225 per tag, depending on the size. That's about the average range. But yeah, there's many more tags. I mean, I feel like there's been about 10,000 tags deployed, and there's about 1,000 stations built. So
I just pasted a link into the chat that's like,
okay, you did it to host
species.
Yeah, do it to everyone though. You did it to host.
Oh, is that not to everyone? Oh gosh, it was. I just went to the default. You guys don't need to see that.
The cool thing is, the COVID kind of shut down the tags, but it didn't shut down the infrastructure building. So that's the exciting part. Now you're going to see tons of tags. Like, yeah, the research is really gonna take off.
Yeah, this is so exciting.
Yeah.
We're at the very bottom of the steep part of the learning curve, but we're going to be climbing it the next few months. Yeah, we'll be going straight up. All right, well, you can keep your questions coming in the Q&A or the chat, but I'm going to let Maya tell you a little bit more about what our plans are for the Caribbean, where we're at right now.
Yes. Okay. You seeing the correct screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So thank you, Lisa. That was so inspiring. And as Lisa Sorensen said, we're really just like trying to use you guys as inspiration for what we're going to try to accomplish in the Caribbean. But before I dive too far into our plans for Motus in the Caribbean, I just want to kind of take a step back and talk about why all of this is important, right? So as many of you who are attending this know, the Caribbean is a biodiversity hotspot. There are over 700 species of birds in the region, including 171 endemics. And of course, the region is also home to many neotropical migrants. So more than 120 species spend the winter in or migrate through the islands, including dozens of warblers and songbirds. It's a stronghold for several species at risk, including the Kirtland's warbler and the Bicknell's thrush. And all of these species depend on the food, water, shelter on the islands, some of them for up to 9 months out of the year. And among neotropical migrants, of course, we also have many shorebird species, including the near threatened piping plover, the red knot, and other shorebirds of conservation concern. So the photos that I have here is really only a small sample of some of the shorebirds that winter in or migrate through the islands. And many of these species have been declining for a number of years now, and we're still trying to figure out why. And unfortunately, this is a pattern. So a recent study showed that birds in North America have experienced severe population declines in recent decades. An estimated about 2.9 billion birds have been lost since 1970. And of course, many of these birds are migratory, including species that move through the Caribbean. Here are just 3 examples of declining species that migrate through the Caribbean region. And unfortunately, for many of these species, there are considerable gaps in our knowledge about them. And these same concerns also apply to our many resident and endemic species. So not just migratory species, but also our residents and endemics. And monitoring efforts are essential to filling these knowledge gaps and providing the information that we need to conserve them throughout their entire life cycle. And Birds Caribbean and our partners have extensive experience implementing regional monitoring programs, previously focused on shorebirds, waterbirds, and seabirds. And in particular, the Caribbean Waterbird Census program has provided novel information that has helped designate and protect sites that are crucial to the survival of bird populations. So just as an example, as a result of Caribbean Waterbird Census monitoring, the Cargill Salt Ponds in Bonaire was designated as a Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network site, or a WISRN site, in 2018. And the data from the Caribbean Waterbird Census has also identified dozens more sites that are likely to qualify, and we're following up with additional data to support their nomination. So it's clear from monitoring programs like the Caribbean Waterbird Census that they can provide essential information on our bird populations. And a couple of years ago, a team of people at Birds Caribbean started developing a project aimed at expanding land bird monitoring in the region. And last year, we were very excited to receive a Neotropical Migratory Bird Conservation Act, or NMBCA grant, from the US Fish and Wildlife Service. And this project focuses on building capacity to monitor land birds by building networks focused on 3 different but very complementary monitoring tools. So the Land Bird Monitoring Network focuses on conducting standardized surveys. The Bird Banding Network focuses on building bird banding skills and resources in the region. And of course, the Caribbean Motus Collaboration, which focuses on expanding the Motus network. But our introduction to Motus actually started before this project, when Pam Loring from US Fish and Wildlife Service gave a workshop at our international conference in Guadeloupe in 2019, which I know many of you attended. And this workshop emphasized the enormous potential of Motus, both regionally and internationally, and it spurred a lot of interest in expanding the network in the region. So you just heard from Lisa about some very impressive efforts to expand the network in the Northeast and now also the Southeastern region of the US. And if you zoom in here, of course, you can see the results of those efforts, right? The map that Lisa showed us at first, you could see that giant gap in the network. But hopefully as you're looking at this map, something else jumps out at you, which is that there is a noticeable gap in the network in the insular Caribbean. But before I zoom in, I just want to acknowledge that there is, in fact, an active station in Bermuda. But for the purposes of this discussion, I'm going to focus on the area within the red circle so that we can discuss this gap a bit more. So you can see from this all-time Motus station map. So within the Motus map, you can select so that you can see all the stations that have ever existed within the network. You can see that there used to be several more stations in the Caribbean. So I know that these dots are kind of hard to see. They're rather small, but there are a few of them, and I'm going to discuss them a little bit in detail. So these stations in Barbados were supported by the Environment Climate Change Canada to monitor shorebird migration. But as of now, they are not active and haven't been active for the last couple of years. These stations in Puerto Rico and on Andros Island in the Bahamas were put up by Pam Loring and colleagues at US Fish and Wildlife Service as part of a large shorebird project. But unfortunately, all of these stations are no longer active, most of them due to damage from hurricanes. Motus projects have also been conducted in Jamaica and the Bahamas by those at the Smithsonian, Georgetown University, and several other collaborators. And these projects focused on the Kirtland's warbler and a few other warbler species. The good news is that there are plans to reactivate most of these stations again, and I'll bring this back around and discuss that in a bit. So we're very excited that our NMBCA land bird monitoring project will end up supporting the installation of several stations and some tagging efforts to begin filling the geographical gap in the network. But in developing this project, it became really clear to us that there was a lot of interest in expanding Motus in the Caribbean, well beyond what we had planned within that project. And partnerships, as Lisa mentioned, are key to expanding the network in the region to provide as much information as we can about our Caribbean birds. So for example, we are working with Environment Climate Change Canada, who is the sponsor of these webinars that you're attending, to expand the infrastructure to monitor many priority shorebirds in the region as well. And so what Birds Caribbean is doing is trying to harness all the excitement about expanding Motus in the region into what we're calling the Caribbean Motus Collaboration, modeled of course after the Northeast Motus Collaboration. And the goal here is to bring together regional and international organizations who are motivated to collaborate and expand the network in the region. And as a regional NGO with a large active network of partners, many of which are here today, Birds Caribbean is well positioned to facilitate this effort. And so far, we think we're heading in the right direction. So the stations in Fonthill, Jamaica are currently active again to monitor the local movements and migrations of several warbler species. Environment and Climate Change Canada is planning to reactivate the stations in Barbados. And with additional funding, we're working to put up stations in Guadeloupe, St. Martin, and Bonaire. And the site in Bonaire, which I mentioned previously, is the Cargill Salt Ponds, which was designated as the Wizard site. So just an example about how that data has been used. There are also plans in the works to put up stations in Trinidad and Tobago, Monte Cristi in the Dominican Republic, and Great Anagua in the Bahamas. We have also been collaborating with Adam Smith from the US Fish and Wildlife Service National Wildlife Refuge System to work on installing stations on national wildlife refuges in Puerto Rico and the US Virgin Islands. Very excited to say that the National Trust of the Cayman Islands has also recently secured funding to put up 3 stations in the Cayman Islands, 1 on each island. And we're also hopeful that Nathan Cooper and colleagues will reactivate the stations on Cat Island in the Bahamas in the future to continue their work on the Kirtland's warbler. And of course, as part of our land bird monitoring project, we're going to be installing 5 stations within the Bahamas, the Dominican Republic, Jamaica, and Puerto Rico. And in fact, the first 2 stations that are the result of this collaboration will be installed next week in Puerto Rico, one at the Cabo Rojo National Wildlife Refuge with Fish and Wildlife Service, and also at Hacienda La Esperanza Reserve with Para la Naturaleza. So we're really excited to get those first stations up. But a key to this program so far has been that private donors have raised considerable funds for this collaboration. So particularly last year's Global Big Day fundraising campaign brought in considerable funds for this effort. So thank you to everyone who donated and supported that initiative. Your contributions will end up supporting several other stations in the region. We sent out a survey to gauge interest in this initiative, and we received a lot of positive feedback. And I will actually include the link to that survey at the end. So please make sure you fill it out if you want to get involved. But we are having discussions with several other partners, including how to make sure we're using these funds to install stations in sites with high potential. And we've also heard some rumors that there are some other stations in the works. So the momentum is there and we want to keep it going. But this is the dream, right? This is that in the next several years, let's say 5 to 10, we're hoping to see a station map that looks something like this. And many of the points on this map are only potential, and the list is constantly growing. I couldn't even put all the points on this map. And at this point, this is also just station infrastructure, right? We're also hoping to support tagging efforts in the region, which will likely involve some crossover with our Caribbean bird banding program. So that's a really exciting way to kind of make sure that those networks are connected. But like I said, we really want to keep up the momentum. So please reach out and let us know how we can help. Many of you have already filled out that form that I mentioned, and I'm going to have it on the last slide. So this is an easy way for you to get a hold of us. But ultimately, the goal of the Caribbean Motus Collaboration and our other monitoring initiatives is to help fill the gaps in the knowledge of our many birds that are within the Caribbean, that call the Caribbean home, so that we can conserve them through their entire life cycle. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who has shown support for this effort so far to expand Motus. Thanks to Pam Loring, who introduced many of us to Motus at our conference in 2019. This is only a partial list of partners, and we imagine that it'll just continue to grow. So thank you everyone for your enthusiasm. We're really excited to work with you. So feel free to reach out to me or Lisa with questions or suggestions. If you're listening and you're interested in getting involved by helping to sponsor a station, or you have a great location to put a station, please let us know. The bit link under the logo will take you to a page that describes the Caribbean Motus Collaboration and also includes the link to the survey that I've mentioned before. So with that, I'll take any questions. Lisa, I think, can also take questions at this point.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Maya. So yeah, if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat or the Q&A box, and we'll be happy to answer them. And then also be sure to register for the next webinar a week from today. All right, so we have a question. Are the plans for placement of these stations going to be usable for tracking along beloved migratory routes or just for local tracking?
So I think a lot of the infrastructure that we're trying to build up now will be definitely really useful for tracking migratory species. I think there's still also a ton of potential, as Lisa talked about, to use this kind of technology for residents and local species. But that might actually involve setting up the infrastructure a little bit differently. But yeah, I mean, really both is the goal. Both is the goal. But a lot of like the individual stations might, at first be meant to really catch those migratory routes.
Okay, excellent. Shalda asks, will the species tag be selected according to the ESA or other species with partners?
Good question. So within our land bird monitoring project, the species that were selected were based on species of conservation concern for sure, trying to understand their migratory movements. And I think that should generally be the goal. But yeah, I mean, tagging efforts are just in the infancy stage in the Caribbean. So
yeah, it's going to be depend on research and conservation priorities and funding.
Exactly.
So we're happy to help whoever, if you want to do a study about habitat use of a local endemic species or resident species, we could work with you to try to get that organized. So yeah, it's all driven by the questions that we have. And right now, because we're with the NMBCA grant that focuses on migratory species, but obviously we're very concerned about our resident and endemics, especially the endangered ones. And there could be some value with doing research on local resident species. So that will be something in the future. Mark Oberall commented, I've seen news on the web of a small antenna for something like $200 that would obviously have a limited range. Are you aware of this? Lisa?
Yeah, that's called an omni antenna, and the range is really only like 500 meters around the antenna, but it's good for creating the nodes. And Dave Lapuma probably could talk too. The CTT has the node systems, which are kind of like that. They don't have a large range, but if you place them near each other and they're less expensive, you can get a good idea of what the birds are doing while you're not there to hand track them, or because you can triangulate that data. And some schools, they just want to know exactly what's going over their school. And so that's been an option for some. And we use the Omni for testing. So if you go to a site and you want to see if it's noisy, you can bring that Omni to determine, how noisy a site is or how good the location is, that sort of thing. But if you're looking at big distances, you really want the larger antennas.
Okay. And yeah, somebody has a question. What is the max distance tags can be picked up from a station? So can you explain a little bit further about that, Lisa?
Yeah, I mean, the average is 15 kilometers, but if the site is good and it has if it's high up and has a really good sight line, we have had birds in excess of 20 kilometers, 25 kilometers. So it is a range, and it depends on different variables. And the 424 antennas actually have a better range, definitely. So that's why, but again, everything has its costs and benefits. So it depends on what works for your group.
Okay, excellent. Jorge Correa comments, we would like to see the Yucatan Peninsula and Belize in this network. We have interest in reddish egrets. We do too in the Caribbean, and Agami heron and shorebirds and bats. Lisa, are stations not in Belize yet or the Yucatan Peninsula? Are there plans for that?
There's some in Belize, but it's not a coordinated effort. There's one or two, and I don't know what I don't know if they're healthy stations. They've put up, David Lapuma is saying that Yucatan is part of Audubon. Okay. Says they're putting out several stations this year. So I think all these countries are starting to build Motus now that our network is stable. They have more, incentive.
Okay. Another question from Rebecca, do towers have a lifespan? In other words, did the towers that were offline, was that only due to hurricane damage, or do all towers need constant maintenance?
It's a great question. And that's what we're dealing with now that we have 120 Motus stations. It's highly variable. Dave Brinker has a Motus station that's been on Assateague Island for almost 15 years. And the rest of ours are about 5 years old. So coastal stations obviously have more wear and tear from the salt spray and higher winds. They have more to deal with, but if they're put in correctly, barring some unfortunate major destructive force like a hurricane, they should last pretty well. The better you put them in, the longer they last, kind of thing.
Yeah. So so Hannah's asking about that. She's saying, how resilient are the stations to hurricanes? You mentioned some were no longer in use because of that. And that's where the learning curve comes in. And we are learning from, the stations that were not, a good structural integrity.
Right.
So we're definitely emphasizing learning from Lisa and others about how to put them up so that they are more resistant to hurricanes and able to withstand them. But
yeah, and we learned that too, but if you put them upright and spend a little extra money and time at the front end, it typically saves you maintenance in the long run.
So that's definitely a huge factor, of course, in the Caribbean, is putting stations up that can withstand storms and hurricanes.
Yeah.
Maybe not all hurricanes, but at least maybe most of them,
Yeah, I mean, that Assateague Island one, that's withstood hurricane force winds over 85 miles an hour, and it's still went fine. Like he might have gone and adjusted a few things, but it survived. So.
And is that a freestanding one or is that attached to some building?
No, it's freestanding, but Dave Brinker is the ultimate in getting things to last a long time.
Hey, well,
he's our guru. He's our guiding light.
Yeah. Okay. David Lapuma comments that a fence is going across the isthmus of Tehuantepec. I don't know how to say that. Some more around Veracruz, and stations are going up throughout Central and South America every month.
That's great.
That's phenomenal.
We had a similar question on Facebook about Belize, so I guess that's answered that. That hopefully there will be stations in Belize soon, if there aren't any now.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, and Cesar Montero asks, is there a way to volunteer or get involved in any way with the towers that are happening in Puerto Rico?
Yes. Yeah, so we are trying to organize those installations as kind of a mini training for people who are likely to install their own stations. I mean, obviously we can't open it up to everyone, but if you're in Puerto Rico and you think that you would want to do this, please email me. I'm organizing it right now. And we're gonna have lots of other stations. As you saw that map expand and expand, we're gonna have lots of other stations going up over the next couple years, especially we know specific sites. So yes, please email me. I'd be happy to talk about, how you could attend those installations and learn. I'm gonna be learning there for sure.
And if you know of any potential funding sources, let us know, because this is all going to take some resources and we're slowly gathering them, but we have a lot of demand, a lot of interest. So we're trying to fundraise from everywhere. Yep. Evelise will be with us in Puerto Rico, which is great.
And I just, for my fundraising hat, it is so important to get private donations, because those funds help with everything, with this, with the putting it up. They help employ people, it just funds. It's so useful to have funds that you can do a lot with and not be so restrictive with Motus, especially.
Yeah, and Julian asked a great question. He says, are locals trained to maintain the Motus stations in their countries, and do you need an electronic background? We most definitely want to train people in countries so that they can learn to put up their own stations and maintain them. So we would love to, have like a point person or two on island that has learned and, will help us with maintaining them. So yes, for sure. And if you want to be that person, let us know.
Yes.
Do you think, Lisa, that you need to have like an electrical engineering background?
Oh, none of us do. You just need to know how to work a computer and I mean, there is some tricks that you learn about wiring, like solar panels and power, that sort of thing, but all of that can be done, learned. You do not need a degree in electrical engineering, although it would be helpful if you had one.
Yeah, sometimes haven't you said that you've had like retired people, like
we do. We actually have retired engineers that help us with certain things. And testing really cool. Equipment is great. Something for everybody.
Yeah. So that's really cool if you can like tap into local knowledge and expertise and get people involved like that aren't usually involved in conservation. You can draw other people in and get them involved, and that's really powerful. Let's see. Evelise was asking, is there any specific project and research ideas in Puerto Rico? So maybe you want to comment a little bit about the species that we hope to be tagging, not this year, but hopefully next year. We do have some funding for tagging.
Yeah, so we're focused on, for the landbird monitoring project, there are a few priority warbler species that we're focused on. And I believe that when we were discussing this with Para la Naturaleza, we were trying to decide, it seems like the Cape May warbler, prairie warbler, and can't remember what the third one is right now off the top of my head, but there were a few warbler species that are really, abundant in that area and are species of conservation concern. So yes, very much in the works, but as we said, tagging, projects that revolve around certain species and understanding specific species that's something that we're really interested in also being involved in. I don't know if that answered your question, Evelise, but I can expand to you later if you need me to.
Okay, any other questions from Facebook or anywhere else? If not, we will just say thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to staying in touch. Oh, David, Lapuma is commenting that Birds Canada has Motus Slack workspace and anyone is invited. I don't have the link, but if you email me, I can give it to you. So jot down his email there.
Yeah, and they also have a Motus listserv that you can join.
Yes.
I think, yeah, and that's important if you're going to be putting up stations, because you can ask a question and people will answer you that have experience too.
Yes.
It's a good way to ask about things. Yeah.
Yeah, and we also have a bird monitoring listserv. So,
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, I should have been ready to put that in the chat, but I'll send that out in the follow-up email, because we'll have this webinar on YouTube and on our YouTube channel, Birds Caribbean, and you can also review it live on Facebook. And then don't forget to join us next week. We'll really get into the nuts and bolts of how to put up a station.
Yeah, and go on the Motus website and check the little dots and see the data that you can see. And you know, the website has a wealth of information from education to research, and you can learn a lot just by spending some time on that. So.
Incredibly valuable, the website. All right, well, thanks again to our panelists, and thanks for your interest. And we hope to be working with you all in the coming months to expand Motus in the Caribbean. So have a good evening, everybody, and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. All right, I'll leave this open for a few more seconds. David Lapuma has put the Motus listserv there where you can sign up. So just click on that link in the chat and you can sign up for that listserv and stay plugged into all this great stuff that's going on. So thanks again, everybody. Take care. We'll see you next week, hopefully. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.